You ate the same breakfast for 11 years. Then, one Tuesday, it made you sick. No new ingredients, no food poisoning, no obvious reason, just your body quietly filing a complaint about something it used to love. Here's the part that stops most people cold. This happens to roughly 1 in 5 adults at some point, and in the majority of cases, the food itself didn't change at all. You did. Your gut, your stress hormones, your nerve wiring, all of it quietly rewired while you weren't looking. So today we're going to trace exactly what flips that switch, why it almost always targets the richest, heaviest foods first, and what the answer tells you about how your body actually works. One of the mechanisms we'll cover was discovered not in a nutrition lab, but in a psychiatric ward, and it reframes what food sensitivity even means. And there's one trigger so common it affects most people reading this right now, yet almost nobody connects it to their diet. Picture a lazy garden hose. That's what most people imagine when they think about their digestive system. Food goes in one end, waste comes out the other. Nothing complicated happening in between. Here's the part that changes everything. Your gut contains over 500 million neurons, more than your entire spinal cord. Scientists call it the enteric nervous system, your second brain, and it doesn't wait for instructions from upstairs. It runs independently, it remembers what it has processed before, and it makes its own judgments about what you eat. And here is the detail that should genuinely unsettle you. 90% of the signals traveling between your gut and your brain are going up, not down. Your gut is mostly talking at your brain, not the other way around. So when a food suddenly feels wrong, the decision often isn't coming from your head. If this is already making you rethink that random stomach issue, hit subscribe, because the next beat is where it gets genuinely strange. That second brain your gut runs is only as sharp as the community living inside it. And that community is less stable than you'd think. Roughly 38 trillion microbial cells call your digestive tract home, more than the number of human cells in your entire body. They are not passengers. They are staff. Specific bacterial species produce the enzymes and cofactors your gut needs to break down specific foods. Lose the right microbes, and the chemistry simply stops working. Here's the unsettling part. That community can shift its dominant species within 24 to 72 hours. One course of antibiotics, a stomach bug picked up on holiday, even a single week of dramatically different eating, and the microbial landscape reorganizes. If the bacteria that help produce lactase cofactors drop in population, dairy that your body handled comfortably for 40 years now ferments instead of digesting. The result is gas, bloating, and, crucially, a distress signal sent straight up to your brain, which files dairy under threat and starts building an aversion. This is why new intolerances so often arrive in clusters, right after an illness. The illness was the eviction notice. The new sensitivities are just the empty apartments. Which food did your body suddenly turn on? Coffee, dairy, or something weirder? Drop it below. The empty apartments from that microbial shift do something else too. They leave the gut wall itself more exposed. And this is where the assumption most people carry quietly collapses. The assumption is that the food changed, that modern wheat is different, that processing got worse, that something in the supply chain turned against you. It feels logical. It's also consistently wrong. Double-blind challenge studies, where participants eat identical macronutrient profiles without knowing whether it's artisan or industrial, show the same reactions either way. The food is not the variable. The gut lining is. Here's the mechanism. Chronic cortisol, the kind that runs quietly elevated for months, not the kind from a single bad day, directly thins the mucus layer coating your intestinal wall. That layer is your gut's first filter. Thinner layer, lower rejection threshold, a fat load or a fermentable carbohydrate that your gut wall once absorbed without complaint now registers as a borderline assault. The gate got narrower. The food drove up in the same truck it always did. There's something quietly brutal about that. You can switch to organic, go artisan, eliminate additives, and the gut wall still reports the same verdict because you brought the same cortisol to breakfast. Now pause on that number for a second. People who reported a major life stressor in the previous 12 months were 2.7 times more likely to develop a new food intolerance than those who hadn't. Not a little more likely, nearly 3 times. And the foods that get flagged first are almost always the richest, heaviest ones. Full-fat dairy, red meat, fried anything. That pattern is not random, and it is not about the food. Your nervous system has a direct line to your gut, and under enough pressure, it starts vetoing meals it once approved without question. What controls that veto is coming up next. The biggest piece of this puzzle is still ahead. Subscribe so the algorithm actually shows it to you. Stress or gut bacteria? Which do you think is the real culprit for you? Guess before the reveal. That direct line your nervous system runs to your gut has a name: the vagus nerve. It's the longest cranial nerve in the body, running from your brainstem all the way down through your chest and into your abdomen. And its primary job in digestion is to apply the brake. Under normal conditions, that brake is proportional. A bowl of plain rice barely nudges it. A plate of creamy pasta, loaded with fat and caloric density, demands real digestive resources: stomach acid, bile, enzyme output, and the vagus responds accordingly, slowing motility, signaling satiety, managing the load. When the vagus is already running hot, chronic stress, poor sleep, low-grade inflammation, that proportional brake becomes something closer to an emergency stop. The same rich meal that your gut once processed without drama now triggers nausea, early cramping, a sudden urgent sense that this was a mistake. The nerve isn't malfunctioning. It's overreacting to a load it no longer has the bandwidth to manage quietly. This is exactly why the heaviest foods get flagged first. A salad barely registers. A creamy carbonara pulls the alarm cord. No food sensitivity required. No mysterious ingredient. Just a nerve that's already been working overtime, and a meal that asked for one thing too many. The vagus nerve is the veto. But what it's actually pulling on, that's where it gets strange. Here's what clinicians in the 1990s did not expect to find. Researchers studying patients on SSRIs, drugs designed entirely for the brain, kept seeing the same side effect logged in the notes. Dramatic shifts in gut motility, new food intolerances, sudden digestive complaints. Not from the pills themselves chemically irritating the stomach, from the serotonin system being tuned. Because it turns out roughly 95% of your body's serotonin is manufactured not in your brain, but in your gut lining, produced by specialized cells called enterochromaffin cells, sitting right there in the intestinal wall. Serotonin in the gut is a traffic controller. It sets the speed and intensity of peristalsis, the wave-like contractions that move food through you. Now think about what chronic stress and anxiety actually do. They alter serotonin signaling directly, independent of anything on your plate, which means the chemical environment your food lands in is genuinely different during a hard year than during a calm one. A meal your gut processed without complaint at 32 during a quiet stretch of your life meets a completely different internal chemistry at 35 after 18 months of grinding pressure. The food didn't change. The lab it walks into did. And that is why the new aversions so often arrive exactly when everything else in your life already feels like too much. Your gut isn't being dramatic. It's running low on a molecule. Did this start after a big life change, an illness, or completely out of nowhere? Curious to see the pattern. So here is what all of it actually adds up to, and the part most people never hear. Dense, fatty meals get rejected first because they carry the highest vagal load. A stressed, inflamed vagus nerve has no spare capacity for a bowl of carbonara. The salad gets waved through. The rich food pulls the emergency brake. That is the mechanism. But the mechanism has a ceiling. And the ceiling is the part that changes everything. Because the serotonin research that came out of those SSRI ward studies in the 90s did not just explain why anxiety rewrites your digestive chemistry. It quietly dismantled the entire framework of permanent food sensitivity. If 95% of your serotonin is manufactured in the gut wall, and serotonin sets the speed and intensity of every digestive contraction, then sensitivity is not a fixed biological trait. It is a current reading. The same researchers who documented the SSRI gut effects also tracked patients after their stress load dropped. Intolerances that had been consistent for 2 to 3 years resolved, partially or fully in a majority of cases. Not because the patients changed their diet, but because the serotonin environment in the gut wall restabilized. The aversion was never a verdict. It was a readout of conditions that can change, which means the most useful question is not, what food did this to me? It is, what was happening in my life in the 12 months before this started? Because the answer to that question is almost always more actionable than any elimination protocol, and it points toward the actual variable, not what is on your plate, but what your gut is running on while it processes it. Your body did not betray you. It adapted to a harder environment using the only tools it had. The goal now is to change the environment and let the menu follow. So, Tuesday's breakfast wasn't a betrayal. It was data. Your gut's 38 trillion residents changed the locks, your vagus nerve filed a noise complaint, and 95% of your serotonin never got the memo that you liked that meal. If you want to know which life event most reliably triggers this whole cascade, that's the next video. Drop your own sudden food villain in the comments. Coffee, dairy, red meat, or something that will genuinely surprise me. Subscribe if you'd like the algorithm to actually show you what comes next. I'll see you there.